Reverend Lisa Carson, and I'm going to read the bio that was in the awareness, but also we have a history here with Reverend Lisa going back to this center back in the 1980s, and also with Reverend James and some of our retreats, that we had, and I personally, because I work in Sacramento, I was able to attend her home a number of times, where she had meditation circles and healing circles. So with that in mind, I want to introduce Reverend Lisa Carson, who first attended a religious science church in Paradise, California at the age of 13. She was grateful to be part of the youth group teen camps and made it through many challenges as a result of those. Lisa lived in Redding from 1984 to 1985, where she took her first practitioner class from Reverend Dr. James. She raised her now 28-year-old son in this teaching, bringing him to Camp Latiez, which some of you may remember, for various church retreats. He now sees the blessings that have unfolded due to his early exposure to science of mind as well. Lisa became a high school, middle school teacher in 1985, and joined the Peace Corps shortly after leaving Redding. She became a minister in 2004, and she's now the assistant minister at the Center for Spiritual Living in Chico. So welcome, Lisa, Reverend Lisa.
Oh, bright light. It's great to be back. And I just, first of all, extend a heartfelt acknowledgement and recognizing all that you've been through as a community here with the fires. And our Chico Center has been treating and just knowing that your greater good is at hand. And so, your neighbors to the south. It was a beautiful drive up this morning, by the way. And I love going through the orchards and just seeing all the colors. Has anybody driven down that way recently when the colors are starting to explode like little bouquets in the middle of the orchard? And I was truly touched by this natural cycle of life coming back. So it was truly beautiful. The title of my talk, Face the Fear, Embrace the Dream. I'd like to begin by doing a little process with everyone. So if you could just get comfortable in your chairs for a moment and just take a deep breath in. And as you exhale, just let your eyes naturally close. And I'd like you to just think about a dream of yours, maybe a heartfelt desire that you've had for maybe decades. Maybe it's been a more recent one. What is it? Maybe it's painting a picture. Maybe it's traveling or writing a book. Maybe it's starting a garden. Maybe it's cooking. Or being the best parent or grandparent that you could possibly be. And now once you get a little essence of that, I want you to think of some fear that could be blocking that manifestation. What is it? Is it fear of failure? Fear of doubts? Fear of not being good enough? Maybe fear of dying. What is it that's the hurdle in the way of your manifestation? And now when you get a little sense of that, I'd like you to open your eyes and bring your focus back into the room. Now, would anybody like to just share one little dream that they had? Doesn't have to be a big one, just something that they'd like to shout out. Okay. Going to the Hawaiian Islands. Okay, nice. And maybe a little fear around doing that as well? Okay, anybody else? a dream or desire that you've had? Well, for me, I want to share an experience that I had, and hopefully you'll be able to garner little tools or ideas that you could use to manifesting your own dream. Because for me, the dream and the journey to get to the dream were almost, they were so intertwined. There was no separation. And I think that's something to recognize, that on the way to any dream, there is a journey. It's not about instant manifestation, because that takes away all the fun of the adventure along the way. And so once again, as I share my experience, hopefully you'll be able to get some insights to help expedite your dream as you continue on. I chose this woman sitting on a suitcase out in the middle of the road to begin my talk because she's looking at a world map. I love the fact that you have a little globe there. And it showed me that 30 years or so ago, right after I left Reading, I had a dream that I wanted to travel around the world in one continuous journey, and I wanted to meet as many people and go to as many countries as I could, connecting with cultures and finding out what people had as their dream and what their passions were, and if they were living them, and if not, why. And I thought, wow, it really spoke to me. But then I thought, it's the most ridiculous dream. It's dangerous. It's going to cost a lot of money. And so I just pushed it aside. Well, I don't know about your experience, but if you push something aside, and it's a very real, active dream, it just gets louder and louder and louder. And that's what this did. Pretty soon, I couldn't ignore it. And then I saw this quote, "And the day came when the risk to remain tight in a bud was more painful than the risk that it took to blossom." That really hit me like the arrow in the Rumi poem was, I can no longer deny this. I have to get out of this enclosed case, this bud that I'm in. I've outgrown my skin. I need to expand and pick up this dream. Well, I had, as I said, a big list of all the reasons why I couldn't do it. All these great, legitimate excuses. I'm sure you've probably had one or two in your life. Well, eventually the list got shorter and shorter. The excuses dwindled down. One excuse went off to college. I broke up with another excuse. And after a while, I had no more excuses left. And so I thought, okay, it's time to activate this dream. It's time to begin the process. I didn't have a lot of money. That didn't seem to stop the dream. It was like, just keep on putting a little away. You can do it. And so on the day that I was going to kind of put all the mechanics in play to get rid of my belongings and sell my house and get my plane tickets, I found out I had breast cancer. And this was not on the list of things that I wanted to do, not on that dream list at all, or reasons why not. I at first felt that it was some bad joke from the universe. I thought, really? Now? Why? Of all times, are you doing this to me? And I went totally into victim mode. But then I had to remember the teaching that I've been brought up in, and I thought, okay, there's a gift in this for me somehow. Fortunately, I caught it early enough, and so after surgery and treatment, about a few weeks after that, I began my journey. But I still had fears. And I want to ask you, what are you listening to? On all the voices that are talking to you on your pursuing your dream or your journey, are you listening to voices of fear? Or are you listening to your heart, which is what I saw in this cloud? I don't know if you see the same heart-shaped cloud that I saw, but I went out one day, and when I saw this, it reminded me that I truly needed to be in that space of listening to that heart part of myself that said, go. This is what you came here to do, not to live in fear. What are you willing to let go of to activate your dream or your journey? For me, I had to get out of my comfort zone. I had a very comfortable little house in Roseville, and it was safe, and I felt protected, and I realized I had to let that all go. I also had to let go of loved ones that I wouldn't see for a while. So is there something that you're wanting to sacrifice or feeling like you need to let go of? Or what comfort zone is holding you in a place of no longer growing? The Tao Te Ching says, when I let go of what I am, I become what I might be. When I let go of what I have, I receive what I need. I truly love this quote because it reminds me that we can never be without, that the universe abhors a vacuum. It always steps in to fulfill whatever need we might have. And this kind of empowered me. I started feeling like I was Jane in the jungle, and I was swinging from vine to vine, but before I could grab onto the next vine, I had to let go of the one that I was holding on to, or I just dangle there. So there was a process of beginning things toward the dream and trusting that the new vine was coming. So what are your vines? What are support systems that you can reach to and grab onto so that you can truly move in the direction of your dream? I had a sister living in Hawaii where I was able to go on my first stop on my journey around the world, and I brought this little puppet. I don't know if you can see my little puppet right there, a little dark, but I knew that I would be able to interact with children around the world if I had a little translator in the form of a hairy pink puppet head. And I was also able to just slow down and visit my niece and nephew. Don't just do something, sit there. We're not human doings, we're human beings. And so I found that after I had done all the busyness to get rid of stuff and plan my trip, I was exhausted, and I just needed to be mindful, to sit on the beach and feel the sand in my toes, to see the rainbows manifesting in front of me. So as you begin to plan or create whatever dream that you desire, make sure you slow down and be present for whatever's around you. Just take it in and know that it's all there as part of this dream journey of yours. One of my first stops was in Bali, where I met this wonderful Indonesian man. And the question here is, can you see without your eyes? He was a former Balinese dancer, and yet he was totally blind. He would face his fears every day, going out and just trusting his senses, trusting that inner guide that always communicated with him, just like we have as our own. And that's why so many teachers will show up if you're clear about where you're going. And this is one of my first teachers. Prepare your mind to receive the best that life has to offer. Now, I've had this in my talk for quite a while, and I was looking at your website the other day, and I noticed that this is right there in your website. There is one mind, and this is a very powerful quote from our founder that reminds us that we need to create the mold for the universe to flow into. We need to have that intention, that desire out there so that the universe will know what is being requested. And so if we prepare our mind, however you do that, some of you might meditate, some of you might visualize. Whatever it is, know that you're preparing, just like the soil in planting a garden. So set that intention as you're getting clear on your dream. What are your rituals? We don't have a whole lot of rituals in this Science of Mind teaching. We could baptize you if you want, I suppose, but we don't do that routinely. We have a few. I love the bell that you have, too, as part of going within. Well, I was so excited when I was in northern Bali to find these 10,000-year-old springs. And I thought, yes, a ritual that I can really kinesthetically experience. So I got my sarong, I did the little things that you're supposed to do to get blessed and go in the water. And I stood in this supposedly holy water, and I just felt cleansed and purified. I released fears of cancer. I released fears of the whole journey that I'd been holding inside for quite a while. So I felt pretty powerful, kind of prayed up. Well, I want you to meet this guy or girl, I'm not quite sure. Anyway, this was a spider that lived outside my guest house at the bottom of a rice ravine. And it was about the size of my hand, I could tell, because I kind of looked at it quite a bit because I was a little frightened of it. And as I walked by, I was grateful that the spider lived outside. And I thought, wow, I'm so glad that that's an outdoor creature. So you can imagine my shock and astonishment when I came home from those holy springs to find this guy right next to my toilet. It was not a good fit. And so I tried to coerce him out. He didn't want to go at first. And so after doing a little dance, he came running right at my bare feet. Well, I jumped back to get out of the way. I ended up slipping on the wet tile floor, and I went flying up. I came down and hit my head on the hard tile and hit my hip on the step going down. When I opened my eyes, my arm was literally touching the spider's legs, and I was looking into his little red beady eyes. I remember the eyes. And I remember saying something like, "You can have the bathroom, just leave me alone." And I hobbled back onto my bed, and there was a mirror right there, and I noticed that I now had a huge goose egg on my head, and a bone was somewhat protruding out of my hip. Well, this was also not on my agenda. And so after being helped by other people in the guest house to kind of get by for the next week or so until I could fly, I flew on to northern Thailand, where I could heal at a guest house. And one day, while I was sitting there, I happened to notice this National Geographic display occurring right in front of us while we were eating breakfast. Now, I don't know if you can tell, but there is a snake coming out of this wall, and he's, maybe 3 or 4 feet long, and he's wrapped his body around this gecko. And they were in a real wrestling match there. And here's the gecko, and here's the snake. And so about 20 minutes later, we could tell that the snake was getting the upper hand, or the upper body, as it were. And after a bit, oops, sorry about that, sensitive little guy. After a bit, all that was left were the 2 legs and the tail sticking out of the snake's mouth. Well, I could totally relate to the gecko. I felt like I had just been engulfed by this snake of life, and now all I could see was the inner part of a snake's belly. I felt overwhelmed. I felt victimized. I thought, how did this happen just 3 weeks into my journey, where I could barely walk and I have 6.5 months to go? And once I knew that the bone wasn't broken, though, I knew that I could muster the strength to try and go on. Well, right after I took the picture on the right, all of a sudden this Buddhist monk came up with a broom. And with a broom handle, he pulled the snake off the wall and squeezed the gecko right out of the snake's body. He tossed the still wriggling snake off into the jungle. We all looked at the gecko now. The gecko shook itself off and then scurried off into the jungle, I guess to be continued. Well, what I got from this was that sometimes when you're at the midst of despair in your life and you don't know how you're going to get from one place to the next, and you don't even know how you're going to pick up the pieces of your life, the universe has a bigger plan for you. The universe knows the hows. It knows the details. This gecko could have never have envisioned being saved in the way he had been saved. It is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change. Think about that. It's not what happens to you, it's how you react to it. It was not the spider that hurt me. It was my reaction to it. I jumped back in fear, and created more pain than the spider might ever have. Other teachers along my journey were these little orphans, and they were definite survivors, being abandoned for whatever reasons. Anyway, they were in northern Thailand, near where I was staying at this guest house, and they were such healers for me because I couldn't really walk. They couldn't really walk. I couldn't speak much Thai, and they could barely speak. So together we crawled around and drooled and laughed and healed together. And they were wonderful little beings. I don't know if you could tell, this guy actually has a little stuffed gecko in his mouth. Kind of creepy. I also, being that I couldn't move very much, I had to postpone part of my trip. And a teacher heard that I was up there just hanging out. So she came and got me and brought me down to this Buddhist school. And I began to teach there, but I was so struck by these wonderful children who were curious about life. And I want to ask you, do you still have that wonder of a child, that curiosity that propels you further, despite how much you think you know? We all have that inner child that still wants to be satisfied and intrigued by life. Do you let yourself laugh? To me, laughter is more powerful than some of the deepest treatments I've done. A good hearty laugh, and I have to admit that Reverend Sue has brought out laughter in me on numerous times in our history. And I just love that we can have that quality. And so these kindergartners were my teachers because they laughed at me all the time because I was always doing ridiculous things because I didn't know all the rules. And they helped me to lighten up in life. I recall when I was being moved from the airport in a wheelchair to get to Thailand, I had a Thai assistant airport guy, and he was wheeling me around. And so I was grateful, because he couldn't speak English, that I remembered the word thank you. So I kept on thanking him every few moments because he'd wheel me here for the 3-hour period we were stuck together. And finally, when I got to my next destination, I realized I hadn't been saying thank you at all. I'd been saying hello over and over. I think he thought I had more of a head injury than a hip injury because it was like, hello, hello, hello. felt totally, so I had to laugh or I'd truly just turn it all in. Now on to Cambodia. Can you coexist? I also learned from this tree that knew that it would grow toward the light and grow up, despite the fact that there was a 1,000-year-old temple blocking its path. It didn't see the obstacle. It saw the opportunity. And together, they were far more beautiful than either of them could have been had they stood separately. So can you coexist with things in your life that you've used as excuses or that they've blocked you somehow? When I went on to India, I realized that I needed to often take that leap of faith. It is our only available transportation, as the quote says. I realized that when I was stuck in hour after hour of tuk-tuk traffic, those are little tuk-tuks they're called, and it felt like we weren't going anywhere, at least we were merging in one direction. So you might not feel you're going quickly on your journey toward your dream, but as long as you're headed in the right direction, that's what matters. I also had to ride my bicycle through this dusty village, and at night it was particularly challenging because my headlamp would go out quite frequently, and I realized I didn't need to know every twist and turn along the way. I just needed to know how to get down the next 10 feet of the path. So sometimes when we don't have a whole lot to see to guide us, take those small steps, 10 feet at a time. What jewels are you discovering? I went off the beaten path, went against my mother's recommendation. She told me exactly, how I could die in all these countries and, all the details. And I was like, Mom, I'm not living in fear. So I went down to southern India where I discovered this beautiful international village called Auroville. Not Auroville like down south, but this incredible, as I said, international community where people came together and they focused in this giant temple and did meditation there. And what forms do your jewels show up as? I had this wonderful guest house worker named Wachella, and she was incredibly helpful, especially when it came to my little thatched hut. Because when I moved in there, in this little hut, I didn't realize that it was actually occupied by a bat. And so every morning, Wachella would come in with her broom and sweep out the bat. Brooms really do come in handy. I guess I should pack one next time. So in my little hut, I just knew that it's okay. I can compensate, because where is my faith right now? Is my faith in my fears? Do I have faith that I will be guided to the circumstances that will give me exactly what I need? To me, that's key. Recognizing that we're always guided to where we need to be to get whatever we need. And so as I lay there in my little bed in the thatched hut, and I watched the spiders crawl along the wall and watched the bats circling overhead, I envisioned that I had like this superhero mosquito net, and that it protected me from all the little critters in my world, and I also put a white light up. So on your journey, are you creating that white light consciousness to move you through your fearful times and know that the universe is always protecting you? You don't need to look at the conditions and say, this is what's so. Know beyond that. Are you allowing new vines? Are you open to meeting people along the way that you might not have ever spoken to before? This wonderful family let me stay with them for about a week. And I learned how to cook Indian food and how to take care of this beautiful little baby. And I interviewed them about their passion and their dreams in life. And they were a wonderful family. What do you walk towards? I found that oftentimes if we stay stuck in the past, we get blocked and we don't see the light that we could go towards. Another little tip, if you're ever in India, make sure that you're escorted across the street by a herd of cows. It's the best way to not get run over, I found out. Can you face your shadow self? Here, when I was in Berlin at the Holocaust Memorial, it brought up a lot of emotions, and one of them was, upon reading more stories of horrific atrocities, trying to recognize what part of me has been less than kind? What part of me could treat people in more compassionate ways? What messages move you? At the Anne Frank House in Amsterdam, I went from room to room and I was struck by many messages that she wrote along the walls saying, I want to be a published author. I want to be read by millions of people someday. I found it kind of ironic that would we know Anne Frank and read about her throughout our school systems today had the events in her life not occurred the way they had. She says, everyone has inside of him a piece of good news. The good news is that you don't know how great you can be, how much you can love, what you can accomplish, and what your potential is. So keep in mind that inner potential that I know you all have. On behalf of Anne Frank, go out and live it. Don't keep it suppressed. Here in front of the Brandenburg Gate, I stumbled across a peace meditation that just happened to be going on. Once a week they had this, and I love that idea of interjecting peace along our journey to places that need that calling, that energy. So whether you're bringing peace to your workplace, peace in this troubled time of our country where there's so much divisiveness, or peace to your next holiday meal with your family members. Think about where you can impart this peaceful consciousness. Do you see barriers or opportunities? As I neared the end of my journey, I was able to look back and see all those huge obstacles, those mountains, all got me to the next step that I needed to be. They got me around things that I had no idea and gave me insights that I could not have gained had I just had a flat, easy, smooth path. The spider led me to a teaching job. The cancer allowed me to appreciate my journey in life on a much deeper level. Can you recognize and celebrate your good? I was able to reunite with my son who was studying in Paris at the time. And so just being able to come back together and celebrate that my journey was almost complete, that I had accomplished all that I had pretty much set out to do. And to just be able to celebrate whatever milestone that you've come to in your life. Maybe it's just that first small step that you've taken. But to give yourself that celebration, that joy for doing what you did. Wayne Dyer says, when you live on a round planet, there's no choosing sides. I was really touched by this quote because after communicating and interviewing with so many people around the world, I realized that they all wanted the same thing that I did. They wanted to have happy, healthy children. They wanted to be able to pursue their dreams. They wanted to live in a safe place. And when we look up from our high above our planet too, we don't see walls and borders. We see beautiful colors merging together. I came across this park in the middle of America before I headed back to California, and I found that it looked like I was lost a few times, but I realized I was on this giant labyrinth of life. And while I was confused occasionally, I thought, no, it's all part of the exploration. So get in touch with whatever you're exploring and know that you can't go wrong. It's laid out before you. Go confidently in the direction of your dreams. Live the life you've imagined. Henry David Thoreau. And I want to leave you with this quote, because after today, I want you to take that first step in confidence, using that imagination that the universe gave you to truly step into your dreams and move beyond your fears. Thank you so much for listening, and namaste.